You're standing in front of an open closet at 6 a.m., annoyed because apparently you own 40 shirts and none of them are the one. Somewhere in your head, there's a running committee deciding what your outfit is going to say about you today, and you don't even notice it happening. That's the weird part. Every single one of your ancestors, going back roughly 300,000 years, spent most of that time with no closet, no shirts, and no fabric of any kind. Just skin. For a species that now spends actual money on ripped jeans, that's a strange place to start. So what flipped the switch? Turns out the clue isn't in a diary or a cave painting. It's in a pile of stone tools a researcher almost tossed in a reject bin. Hang tight, we're getting there. First, the obvious question nobody asks. Why would a hairless primate on a hot continent need clothing at all? Africa isn't exactly known for its brutal winters, and that's precisely what makes this a genuine mystery instead of a boring one. If clothes were just a cold weather fix, you'd expect them to show up only once humans wandered into places like the Caucasus or Siberia. Instead, the evidence points to something happening way earlier, while everyone was still comfortably warm at home. That timing problem is the whole reason this topic keeps archaeologists up at night. The tools that cracked it. In 2016, a team led by archaeologist Mark Collard compared stone and bone tools from Ice Age sites across Europe. Some made by Neanderthals, some by early modern humans living in the exact same freezing landscape at the exact same time. Both groups obviously needed some kind of body covering to survive winters that regularly dropped well below freezing. But the toolkits told two different stories. Neanderthal sites mostly turn up simple hide scrapers, good for stripping fat and flesh off a skin so you could drape it over your shoulders. Functional, basic, the Paleolithic version of throwing a towel around yourself after a shower. Modern human sites, though, had a much wider range of specialized tools. Piercing awls, fine cutting blades, implements that only make sense if you're doing something more advanced than draping. You don't need a precision awl to wrap a hide around your torso. You need one to punch clean, evenly spaced holes so you can join two pieces of material into something fitted. That's not a blanket anymore. That's a garment with a design. Here's the detail that should stop you for a second. The study estimated this tooling gap appears in the record starting somewhere between about 40,000 and 75,000 years ago, meaning tailored, clothes-fitting clothing may have existed as a modern human specialty well before it shows up anywhere near Europe's coldest stretches. One group was insulating, the other was engineering. And if you've ever wondered why modern humans expanded across freezing continents while other human species eventually didn't make it, you're looking at a real piece of the answer, sitting quietly in a box of unglamorous stone flakes nobody thought was interesting for decades. But tools only tell you clothing existed somewhere. They don't tell you why it started. For that, we have to go back even further to a cave on the South African coast. The beads that ruined the simple story. At Blombos Cave, researcher Christopher Henshelwood's team uncovered dozens of small perforated shells, nacerious snail shells, deliberately pierced, some showing were patterns consistent with being strung and rubbed against skin or fabric over time. These date to somewhere around 75,000 years ago in a coastal region that was never brutally cold. Nobody strings shells onto a cord to keep warm. You do it to be seen, to say something, which means the drive to decorate the body, to turn it into a kind of signboard, was already running tens of thousands of years before anyone needed insulated clothing to survive an Ice Age winter. Function came second, meaning came first. Kind of humbling, honestly, that our earliest confirmed instinct as a species wasn't protect myself, it was notice me. And once you're already decorating your body, wrapping it in a specific hide, worn a specific way, isn't a big leap. It's the same impulse with more material to work with. Which particular animal you wore probably meant something. Who was allowed to wear it probably meant something too. Somewhere on that coastline, ranking systems were quietly being invented, one shell necklace at a time. Which brings us to the part where clothing stopped being optional and became the difference between your bloodline continuing or ending completely. Roughly 100,000 to 60,000 years ago, Earth cycled through savage glacial swings. Ice sheets crept outward, sea levels dropped, and populations of early humans pushing into Eurasia hit conditions that could kill an unprotected body in a matter of hours. This is where those specialized tools we talked about stop being a curiosity and start being survival infrastructure. A tightly stitched, layered garment traps warm air against skin the way a loose hide simply cannot. It seals the wrists, the neck, the places where your body loses heat fastest. The biological equivalent of leaving your front door cracked open in a blizzard versus actually shutting it. Groups with that sewing knowledge pushed deeper into hostile territory and lived. Groups without it stayed put or didn't make it all. This is quite possibly why you exist in the first place. Sitting somewhere warm right now, mildly frustrated about laundry day. Here's where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable, and it's the part most retellings skip. Neanderthals weren't unaware of clothing. They processed hides, used cold-adapted bodies with stockier builds and shorter limbs that retained heat better than ours, and survived brutal European winters for well over 100,000 years before modern humans ever showed up. They were not primitive. They were, by most measures, extremely well adapted to their environment. But if that tooling gap holds up, it suggests their clothing clothing may have stayed at the drape and wrap stage while modern humans quietly moved on to tailoring. Fitted sleeves, sealed seams, layer construction. Not a difference in intelligence. A difference in one specific technology that happened to matter enormously once the climate turned vicious. Extinction, in this telling, might partly come down to something as unglamorous as who figured out how to sew a sleeve. Sit with that for a second, because it's a genuinely strange thought. An entire human species might have lost its long-term survival bet over stitching technique. From there, things move fast, in evolutionary terms anyway. By around 19,000 years ago, at a site called Ohelo 2 near the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists found twisted plant fiber cordage, evidence that people were already spinning and twining fibers in a thread, a step toward woven fabric rather than just worn hide. Weaving meant lighter clothing, dyeable clothing, clothing that could be shaped for a specific season or a specific ritual instead of whatever animal happened to be available that week. By the time farming societies were domesticating flax and sheep thousands of years later, clothing had split into an entire vocabulary. Garments for mourning, for status, for ceremony, for war, for ordinary Tuesdays. Empires would eventually rise and fall over control of textile trade routes. All of it traces back to a shell on a string and a scraper someone sharpened into something better. So why did clothes actually start? Not for one reason, for a stack of them, arriving in the wrong order to make a tidy story. Long before anyone needed warmth, someone wanted to be noticed. Long before anyone crossed into a freezing landscape, someone had already learned to pierce, cut, and join material with intention. And only once the climate turned hostile did all of that accumulated know-how become the thin, stitched line between a bloodline continuing and a bloodline ending completely. Which brings us back to you, standing in front of that closet, irritated that nothing feels right for today. You're not really choosing fabric. You're doing the exact thing that got recorded in a scraper someone shaped 50,000 winters ago, deciding, without even meaning to, what your covering is going to say about who you are before you've said a single word.